Welcome to Books in the Freezer, a podcast dedicated to the deliciously disturbing world of horror fiction. I'm your host, Stephanie, and today I'm joined by returning guest, Jocelyn Codner, to talk all about music horror.
Yay! Thank you so much for having me back. I love coming on Books in the Freezer.
Yeah, thank you for coming back. I know we've been talking about doing this for forever.
Yes. This has been a long time in the works.
So I'm glad we are finally here to record. We've been reading, reading and watching
Oh my god.
so many things leading
Yeah.
up to this.
The academic struggle.
We are talking music in horror, which meant we got to watch a lot of really fun movies, a lot of
Mhm.
rewatches, a lot of first time watches.
Yes. And a lot of watches that should have been first time watches, but then someone ran out of time.
We will
So,
get to that
yes, it'll happen.
someday. Okay. How do you see the theme of music show up in horror?
This is a really great question and thing to talk about. I'm interested to hear what your response is to this because I definitely saw things repeated in terms of use of music in horror literature. Also, comparable in film. There are a couple different ways I see it pop up. I saw in the books that I read for this episode, I saw music pop up as an atmospheric tool to help set the stage
Mhm.
and help really paint the picture of what was going on in the book. I feel like that is a common occurrence in horror film. We always talk about the needle drops and things like that. But I also saw it pop up as a tool, both
Mhm.
for
Yes.
good and evil. Yeah, I saw that pop up a lot. And I also saw it pop up as kind of like a weapon, I guess that falls under tool, but like I think music, I see it pop up as kind of like a medium of
Mhm.
sorts that allow kind of like magic that have allowed characters to have extra powers or to do things they normally wouldn't do. And I also saw it pop up as an actual weapon. I guess we'll talk about this. It's a little more nuanced, but there were a lot of different ways that music was being featured in these stories.
Yes, I did see it as a conduit for supernatural
Yes, conduit is the
powers
right word. Yes.
or curses or
Mhm.
like the music itself, like a vinyl record
Yeah.
or like Lords of Salem. Or
Yes.
one I saw too was kind of the culture around music
Mhm.
and
Yes.
concerts like Jennifer's Body. Like where
Absolutely.
it's not like the music itself, it is the culture of how badly these people want success.
Yes. Mhm. Mhm. And also the opportunity that music and the culture of music offered the characters in the stories. One of the books that I read that I'm going to mention later, the music, the role of the music brought people together in a festival setting, which became the stage for the
Yes.
horrors, right?
Mhm.
So there's a lot of that happening both in the books and the movies.
Like the culture and communal aspect
Hmm.
of music.
And the values that some of the music espouses as well. That culture has their own set of values. Each musical tradition, the culture surrounding that have their own values. And that definitely played a role in what was happening and what the characters' choices were and why they were in positions that they were in the first place.
I was gonna ask, like, why do you think, genre-wise, there's always, like, certain types of music that
Yes.
are featured as, like, the
I tried
horror?
so hard. I tried so hard to have a variety, and it's so hard. There's very specific types of music that are featured in horror, and, I mean, I think it's different for each genre of music that's featured. Obviously, like, metal music was, like, a big bugaboo for folks during the Satanic Panic,
Mhm.
um, that, played a big role, is directly tied to this concept of Satan, evil,
Yeah.
etc. And then the blues is featured a lot. I
Yes.
noticed blues and jazz, and I feel like that. And I'm going to talk more about this with one of my books. That has a direct connection to that concept of the United States as a haunted house, which I just love
Yes.
that concept. It it is a direct line to our own horrors and our history. So I feel like that's the reason why blues and jazz pop up a lot. Um, I do have there's another genre that popped up in my reading, but honestly, those were the only two. There was just basically like metal and rock and then like blues. Did you encounter any other kinds?
Um, okay, so in my reading, I do have one is kind of an indie band,
Mhm.
acid folk rock,
Okay. Okay.
and I was thinking The Perfection. That's like very classical.
Mhm. That's true. Yeah. The mania, I think there's like when you think about like the film Amadeus
Mhm.
and Mozart and also like Beethoven and Bach and all of their legacies, there is a weird connection to mania there where it's like, oh, they got so wrapped up in the work and they're just like these geniuses that they are devoted to the music and they lose themselves in it. And it's interesting that classical music, at least I grew up in a house that listened to a lot of classical music and I played classical music as a flutist for a long time. There absolutely is a connection there. And when you read up on different pieces and different composers, sometimes what they're writing is about hell or about Satan or about witches or about demons. And sometimes there are cases of classical music. I think it was the Rite of Spring caused riots because people became so overwhelmed and they were worked into a fervor that like because they'd never heard something so hardcore before. It was like the first time that something that wild had been performed live, and they just lost their minds and literally rioted. So yeah,
Like the
that's
first
true.
mosh pit.
Yes, yeah. And this was like in the I'm not even gonna try and date it. I don't remember the 1800s at some point. But but yeah, it was just like they music is a direct connection to like our souls, our bodies. Like it is such a full body mind experience that yeah, it really we have involuntary reactions sometimes. So it's another thing about music and perhaps horror, this connection between the two and religion. It's no wonder that music is so closely tied to religion. It is just, it affects us like almost nothing else does. Maybe food is the other thing that affects us the same.
I had a few things. I was going to ask you about your expertise as
Oh,
a
yeah.
classical
I would love to,
flautist.
love to talk about my
Is it
expertise.
flautist or flutist?
In the US, we usually say flutist. In the rest of the world, I think flautist is more
Okay.
often. I switch on and off sometimes, but flutist. I'm from the United States. Yeah, I grew up playing classical flute. My dad was a music teacher for decades. My family's very musical. My husband is a musician. I don't think there's anything more important in my life than music. It ties my whole life together. It's more important to me than books. It's like the top. I'm very connected to music. It's my favorite thing. I love to listen to it. I listen to all genres.
Mhm.
We love going to lots of live music. For the listeners, we've Stephanie and I have seen live music together. It's
Yeah.
always been a great time. And that is like a big part of my life. And I still play flute. I play Irish flute now. And that has been really fulfilling as an adult to just like have that outlet. And
Yeah.
it's helped me through a lot.
I love that. I love that that's something that you've been doing for, I mean, forever, and you're still doing it.
Mhm. Yeah, it is so nice to just have
Mhm.
that as something that I can pick up when I need it. How about you? Do you play music at all?
I took piano for like a year and a half in high school,
Mhm.
and then only stopped because I went to college. Like I took it on like
Yeah.
way later. And like I enjoyed it. I really liked the puzzle of like kind of figuring out new pieces of music and like
Yeah.
reading and kind of like until I could like hear the song and I'm like, okay, I
Yes.
get it. I'm definitely
It's
not
satisfying.
naturally musically gifted.
I think very few people are.
Yeah,
It comes down to practice
yeah.
mostly.
I know my husband, like many people, bought a guitar during COVID.
Yes.
But he does practice like every day. And I know he gets like
Mhm.
so much joy over like,
Mhm.
finding new music and kind of like figuring out like a cool riff that he heard.
Yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my husband also plays guitar. I think our husbands have talked to each other about playing guitar,
Yeah.
actually.
Mhm.
And for him, I my husband's been in bands like his whole life since he was an adolescent, and guitar and music. He produces, writes, records, produces like all of his own original music, and for him, I know it's an extremely important outlet as well. So yeah, I guess anyone out there who is an adult who either played music when they were a kid or has never played music before in their lives, but are curious about what it might be like, or might want to pick up an instrument, I highly encourage you to do it. You can do it. Your time has not passed. It will enrich your life. And all it really takes is like 10 minutes of practice a day, and then you can build it up and try to work in more time here and there. It's really just about consistency. So don't think that it's not in the cards for you. If it's something you really want to try, totally do it.
Yeah. I know that my piano teacher, I don't think didn't start playing until her like late 30s, early 40s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I felt like she had a very strong grasp of like theory. I'm like,
Oh
okay.
yeah. Music theory is actually really tough.
Yeah.
I am not a theorist at all. I don't care. I just play it.
As listeners probably know, because I have mentioned it on several episodes, I did grow up in a very fundamentalist sect of Christianity where we were not allowed to listen to secular music.
Oof.
All secular music was called rock music, which was something that always bugged me as someone who like loves listening to music. I'm
Mhm.
like, that's not really rock. I would classify that more as
Yeah, right. This is indie, thanks. Acoustic indie.
just remember all these like sermons about like the evils of rock music.
Oof. Yeah. Well, I got a couple books that address that
Yeah.
directly. It's so weird, the range of music's role in religion. For some religions, it's the boogeyman, right? And
Hmm.
then in other religions, it's like a main tenet of how you worship.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating where people, or how people interpret music, and what its role should be in their lives and in the lives of the people around them.
I mean, yeah, the sect I grew up in had really strict rules around what music should be, and especially percussion. Like, there was not allowed to be like any drums
Oh,
in the music you listened to unless it was
that's
somehow
rough.
this like it had to be like orchestral. Anyway, there was a lot of rules. Their big rule was like music should move your spirit, not your body. So if it
Ooh,
causes you to move your body, then it is of the devil.
I mean, I would say that's impossible. You can't have like one where the music does all of it.
I know.
So that's probably why you couldn't really listen to much music at all.
No. Everything is bad when
Yeah.
you're going with that rubric.
Yeah.
All right. Well, should we get into some of the movies
Yeah,
that
yeah.
blend music and horror?
Mhm. Absolutely. Got some good ones.
I was thinking Lords of Salem because that is like
Mhm.
cursed vinyl,
Yes.
which we will also talk about later as a
Yeah.
concept. But
And it also has this level of disorientation throughout the
Mhm.
film that music is a great way to illustrate that, because music can make us feel that way. And in some of the books that we're going to mention, like that vibe is repeated.
Yeah, definitely that. This is the the Rob Zombie movie where Sherry Moon plays a DJ like overnight, and she gets sent this vinyl, and it's from the Lords of Salem, and she plays it over the radio, and she is not aware of the consequences of playing that vinyl. It is a weird movie, and
Yeah.
everyone that I've made watch it does not like it. You included.
Yes,
But I
I
like
am
it.
on the edge. I am on the edge. I think it's very aesthetic and it's really interesting. It is a fun, like, artsy movie, but I was like, I don't know if I can get into this. I
Which is
tried.
so understandable. You also watched Queen of the Damned.
Yes. Oh my
Was it
god.
a first time watch?
This was a first time
Oh
watch
my
for
gosh.
me. I was like texting my sister while I was watching it, and she was losing her mind because this was like one of her favorite movies when she was a teenager, and I'm a little older than my sister, and for some reason I just like never sat down and watched it with her. Um this movie was amazing. It also, I would not say, is a good movie by any means, but it was so entertaining. It was absolutely hilarious, like such a fun romp. Aaliyah is amazing in it, like
Mhm.
RIP.
Yeah.
But, the greatest thing in the world watching this movie, like, I don't know, 20 years later, is that Lestat, this powerful old being who is so fed up with humanity and the world that he is committed to going into, like, a deep slumber because he's like, "I'm sick of this. I just need a long nap so I don't have to, I can cleanse my soul and my mind and everything and come out of it refreshed." He is awoken from his long nap by the irresistible tones of new metal. He cannot stay slumbering any longer. Once he hears the opening riff of uh Down with the Sickness, he's like, I gotta go. I
Okay.
gotta get out of here.
Whomst among us
I
could
need to leave
resist
my
that?
crypt. And like Korn is like drawing him out of his like Louisiana graveyard so he can rejoin society at the height of musical art. And as someone who was, peak teen during the new metal times, I have such a soft spot for new metal. And if other people out there like new metal as well, I highly recommend this podcast called the POD Cast. That's cast with a K, where they break down seminal works in new metal. They
Oh my
analyze full
gosh.
albums, and it's two of the funniest guys ever. It's a lot of fun. But yeah, I mean, it it's just so ridiculous. But yeah, Lestat ends up fronting a new metal band because he's so drawn to this art form. And he becomes one of the most famous musical artists in the world, and he builds this reputation for being a real vampire amongst normos. Like, people are really buying into his shtick. They're like, yeah, it's fake, but also is it? And he's like not hiding anything. He's just gobbling people up left and right. And yeah, he has to use his music to fight an interspecies battle, basically. So I don't want
Yeah.
to give anything away. I don't want to spoil this multi-decades old movie, but
Multi-decades old booked.
yeah, that's true. Even
Even
older
longer,
book.
even older. He also uses music to, like, awaken an ancient
Yeah,
vampire.
that's right. He has so Lestat proves himself to be quite the virtuoso violinist, and yes, he uses his skill playing the violin to awaken Aaliyah, basically. So that's a fun little detail. He's
Yeah.
just like a very talented musician.
See, I already mentioned The Perfection. Have you seen that one?
No, I haven't. I'm
Oh
gonna
my
have to watch
gosh.
it.
Okay,
Yeah.
I don't wanna say anything because I feel like that is a movie you need to go into kind of as blind as
Ooh.
possible. That is, like, maximum enjoyment.
Okay.
But there is a theme around classical music and this, like, academy for classical music.
Ooh, I love that. That sounds great. That's kind of giving me, knowing like nothing about the movie, just saying that it's about an academy of a classical art, it's giving me Suspiria vibes.
I cannot wait to hear what you think. So, I also watched We Summon the Darkness, which was going back to music as culture and Satanic Panic, which I don't know if you've
Mhm.
seen that with
No?
Alexandra Daddario and Johnny Knoxville.
Wow. Hmm.
Very not enough Johnny Knoxville,
Yeah.
TBH, but
Yeah.
it is essentially about the Satanic Panic and murders happening kind of in conjunction to, like, rock concerts in the
Ooh.
80s, and I don't wanna say too much else.
Mhm. Fair.
Um,
Fair.
Also mentioned Jennifer's Body as another, like, culture of music
Ugh.
concert.
I love the band in Jennifer's Body so much.
Low
Low
Shoulder.
Shoulder.
I mean, truly a cautionary tale against dating indie boys.
Yes, no, and because it is true. Jennifer's Body is a true text. It is, nonfiction. And don't do it. Don't date indie rock boys as someone who's done this. Don't do it. It is nothing but trouble. You are gonna be sacrificed one way or the other, and it's not gonna be
Maybe
pretty.
they won't throw you into a waterfall, but
They'll find another way to do it. Um, but yeah, it's so funny to me that the band's name is Low Shoulder. It's just so funny. I don't know why. I can't explain why it makes me like cackle
I just
every
feel like
time.
it's so perfect for that
Yeah.
late 2000s.
Yes. And their
Like,
song, oh my god. It's just so
and the
stupid.
oh my god, and the Adam Brody of it all, who was, like,
Oh,
in the 2000s, like,
yes.
the indie boy,
Oh my god. And
the indie boy.
he
Like
plays it
Seth Cohen.
perfectly. Yeah.
Yeah.
There are moments of Seth Cohen in the OC that I still, like, say his lines to this day, and, like, I just assume everyone knows what I'm talking about. No, they don't, but I don't care. I love him to death.
They're not as familiar with the iconic 2000s masterpiece that was The
No,
OC.
apparently not, which to me is a staggering thing. Like, how could you not be very obsessed with it? It's whatever. Everyone lives their lives differently, I guess.
Okay, and then, Green Room,
Yes, okay, so
which
this is this is
mhm.
my confession. I have never seen Green Room. It is a movie I should see, and anyone who knows me would be, like, surprised I have not watched Green Room for, like, a billion reasons. I kept telling Stephanie I was gonna watch Green Room for this episode, and I didn't. I ran out of time, but I will watch it ASAP.
I kinda do understand because I think knowing that it's going to be a stressful
Yeah.
experience, it's tough
Yeah.
to, like, make room for that and be like,
Mhm.
"Okay, I'm gonna put on this knowingly very stressful movie."
Yeah. I need to
Uh
have a plan before I go into it. I need to have a day where I've got time where I can watch that and then I can watch something delightful after it, like Hocus Pocus or something.
yeah, something to cleanse the palate of
Yes.
having to watch, Sir Patrick Stewart play a
Oh,
Nazi,
I
you know?
know. It's just like really difficult as someone who grew up on Next Generation, like it's tough to see. I'm sure he's phenomenal,
Oh, he
but
is.
that's also why it's hard
Yeah,
because he's probably very good at depicting this wretched human.
he's just a great actor.
Yeah, he's stunning.
So it's about this punk band who is touring, and I have not watched it in a minute, so I forget the specifics about how they get this gig. The point is they end up performing at this venue that is kind of this like neo-Nazi, like white supremacist, like club venue. And they do, I think they open up their set with Nazi punks fuck off.
Oh, yes. Yes. Of course. I was actually going to bring this up because, talking about culture around certain musical traditions, in punk, yeah, they had that whole, and they still have neo-Nazi problems. They still have like all these white supremacists that try to infiltrate the culture and the scene. And so, the dead Kennedys tried to do their part by doing Nazi punks fuck off. And you have to monitor your own scene. Like, as someone who grew up like in a punk scene, in a hardcore scene, and my husband grew up in similar scenes, like, you have to self-police your scenes, and it makes sense that this band might have shown up not really knowing that this was like a white supremacy club, and because a lot of the times it takes a second to
Mhm.
figure out, like, when you're in a punk show, like, how do you identify who might be a problem and who you need to, like, kind of get out of the venue and stuff. And if you're going to a venue, like, this is why a lot of communication is important. Like, you have to talk to other people in your scene, so that you know what to expect, especially if you are in the punk scene in particular.
Yeah. So I think after their set, somebody goes back to the green room and essentially they see something they were not supposed to have seen. And the higher ups kind of make the call like, okay, these people can't leave. They've seen too much. And it is
Mm.
a standoff.
Oof. Oh, stressful.
It is so stressful. It is so good.
I will watch it, I promise.
Well, speaking of the punk scene, I showed you I got that book. I think it was from Catapult. It was called like Black Punks Now.
Yes,
Black Punk
yes.
Now.
It looks really good.
Yeah, but it's an anthology, so it's like essay collection and there are like fictional short stories and comics, but it was essentially, yeah, about the history of like black punks and like where they've been and what they're doing now.
Yeah, that's fat. I love music history
Mhm.
books. I love anything that talks about, like, the history and current stance of whatever genre. Again, I love all genres of music, but that, when you, like, sent me a picture of that when you got it, I got so excited because I especially like books that talk about the punk scene. So yeah, that I'm going to be buying that very soon. Studio 666 is the Foo Fighters. Basically, it's just like the Foo Fighters having a fun time. It came out last year, um, and it is the Foo Fighters as the Foo Fighters.
I love that.
Yeah, it's really cute, and they need a place to record their new album, and so they end up renting a house, like, kind of out of the way, and the house has a nasty history to it, and things start to go bad pretty quickly, and Dave Grohl is like possessed by spirit to finish a demonic song, and he just it's silly. It's so fun. There are really gnarly kills. Everybody ends up dead for the most part, and basically like there is this evil it's an occult kind of
Mhm.
story, and they're trying to finish this evil song, and they use the Foo Fighters to do their bidding, and it's just really adorable. And there's some really funny jokes in there about Foo Fighters and about Dave Grohl and everything. So they're not the greatest actors, as I'm sure folks can imagine. But if you want something silly, and it is pretty gnarly in terms of gore, and there's some fun kills. So if you want something like that, it's not really scary. It's a great thing to pop on. And then Slumber Party Massacre 2 was so much fun. I know people know about this. I know people love this movie. But basically, it is the follow up to Slumber Party Massacre, where some of the survivors from the first film have a band, and they go again go to another location. They go to someone's house to like record and relax and like have a nice time, and they start getting slashered. Basically, it all starts again like your classic slasher situation. But the band in it, like the girls band, they're really good. They're great. It's like fun, kind of like 80s pop rock. They have like so much attitude, and they're great. Like it sounds really good. I don't know who they got to actually play the music, but they're legit musicians. It sounds awesome. And yeah, it was just like a fun, standard slasher, really fun romp. So if you haven't seen Slumber Party Massacre 2, you don't have to see the first one, but they are kind of connected. They are pretty,
Are they?
um,
Okay.
yeah, because they refer back to each other. There's a lot of actually, there's a lot of trauma that is talked about from the first movie.
Oh,
Like the
wow.
girls are dealing with the traumatic blowback from their experiences in the first movie, and that's kind of the main focus of the second movie, other than the music, of course, other than the band and how they're going to be famous. But yeah, so you should watch both if you haven't seen either of them.
I've
But
seen the first, so
yeah, you could just jump into the second if you wanted to.
okay. I'm very excited to do that. Did you ever listen to the Black Tapes podcast?
Yes, but it was a long time ago, so I'm not going to remember
I just
whatever it is
remember
you're going to bring
that, like,
up.
when it got closer to the end, they were in search of, like, a sound that was gonna, like,
Yeah.
bring forth the end of the world, and I remember they had, like, a snippet of it, like, it was one of the early episodes, and they're like, "If you don't wanna listen to it, like, just skip ahead." Like, they really hyped it up, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, like, should I be worried?"
That was such a good
It
podcast. I really,
was.
really enjoyed that one because it
They're
was
like
scary.
the unsound.
Yes. Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by Fangoria, the world's best horror and cult film magazine since 1979. Listeners can use code BOOKSINTHEFreezer to get 20% off their order. That includes, of course, merchandise and first-time subscriptions and single issues of the magazine. Not only are there tons of articles and interviews about upcoming horror movies, there's a regular segment by Stephen Graham Jones all about slashers called Slasher Nation, so you're going to want a copy. So again, that is code Books in the Freezer, and thank you, Fangoria, for supporting the show. Well, should we get to the books?
Yes. Oh my goodness. Okay. So my first pick is White Tears by Hari Kunzru. This came out in 2017, and I feel like people don't talk about this book. I feel like, it did moderately well when it came out, and Hari Kunzru is a pretty well-known author, and he's since published a lot of other buzzy books, but like this one really stuck in my brain, and this is the reason why I wanted to do this episode, was so I could talk about this book specifically. So White Tears is kind of an American ghost story, like in the vein of Beloved. That's what we're talking
Interesting.
about, that kind of thing. There are lots of trigger warnings for this book that go beyond just standard horror. Like there's a lot of racism, there's a lot of violence against Black people, and so just FYI, if you're thinking about going into this book, it's very emotionally heavy. It's more of a revenge tale, like retribution for all of the originators of the Delta Blues. And so basically retribution for people who created American culture as a whole. So we followed two characters for the most part. Seth is our main character, our main protagonist. He's shy and awkward. He is a guy who loves music production and he's very talented in it, but otherwise he doesn't really have much of a personality. He's the kind of person whose personality is his best friend. And his best friend is a guy named Carter, who is a super rich kid who's like desperate to prove his authenticity through collecting and hoarding only the most legit, in his opinion, of American blues recordings throughout history. And the more obscure, the better, in his opinion. And that makes him more real. This is like his weird thing. So Carter's like one of those guys, one of those white guys who had white dreads. Like he's one of those dudes. Okay.
He's that genre of
Uh-huh.
person.
Yeah. We've all seen them. We've all had to deal with them. So Carter and Seth, after college, they're college buds, they're roommates. They open a music production company, and it's funded by Carter with his family's money. But what Carter doesn't know about Seth is that Seth has had episodes in his past where when he listens to certain music, usually music from the past, he starts to slip dimensions. He almost becomes like consumed by the music and gets sucked back in time. And it's a very like Twilight Zone feeling, but bleaker, even bleaker than Twilight Zone. So Seth has struggled with this, and he has done all of these things to try to prevent this from happening to him again. Mostly he only listens to music from like the 80s and on. He listens to electronic music the most. He doesn't listen to acoustic or, you know, this old school blues that Carter is really obsessed with. But Carter starts to collect these Delta blues recordings, so it starts to come up more. And one day Seth is out making field recordings. They live in New York City, so he's like out in one of the parks like making field recordings of just like street noises and stuff to play around with his producing. And when he goes home to listen to the tape has a mysterious tune on it being sung by an older black man. But the problem is that when Seth was actually in the park recording, there was no one singing in the park. There was no one playing music at all. So he doesn't know how this got on the recording, but Carter becomes super obsessed with this song and he's like loving it and he wants to like dig into it. So they do this weird thing where they actually make a record, like they turn it into a real recording and they make a fake pressing of this song, and then they post this to all of their like nerdy music collector message boards because they think it's a silly joke, because it's not a real song. Like they can't find it anywhere. They have no like real song
Yeah.
in quotes. It's never been recorded that they can find. So they think this is like a silly joke they can play on all these other collectors, but they get a response they weren't expecting. Like people start to ask very specific questions about the song and the vinyl that they found it pressed on, and they're like being hounded, and they made it up. They're like, this isn't real. Like, I don't know what you guys think, but like, this wasn't a real song. So this spirals out of control and the song just takes on its own life. And Carter's obsession just grows and he sinks into the obsession. And Seth starts to slip again in dimensions. And so the song's haunting them basically.
Wow.
Um, so then a confusing tragedy happens, and that was all set up. All that stuff that I just said is like set up for the actual horror of the
Oh my
book.
gosh.
I
Yeah.
know, I know. I don't mean to ramble on. It's just like that's the setup. So a very confusing and tragic thing happens, and Seth basically is left to uncover the truth about this song and the history of his friend Carter's rich white family and how exactly they got all their money. And
Ooh.
so Seth basically is running through dimensions and time and identity and like you know, just to uncover the truth of things. And he's not doing this intentionally. He's being pulled in. Basically, it's like cosmic horror-esque. He is slipping through dimensions because of this weird thing that is in his brain. It's like very disorienting. Not clear at all what's happening with Seth. Not clear what level of control he has over this. It's just like he's kind of slowly growing insane. And you're not sure how true the things that are happening are, or if it's just him kind of losing his mind. So White Tears is not an obvious horror book. It is not classified, I don't think, as horror. I think it was like published as a literary fiction, but it
Yeah.
is terrifying to me. It was, like I said, just so disorienting. It is not a cute adventure story. It's not like he's romping through time and dimensions to solve a mystery. No, he's like going through a brutal experience, and it is definitely horrific. I already mentioned it feels very cosmic horror-y, and it's one of those titles that proves that cosmic horror is actually like real, and it exists as the lived experiences of marginalized groups throughout history. And like, I'll speak for the American experience, but like white Americans historically are the destroyer of worlds. Like, we are the Cthulhu. We came to this country and we were the overwhelming thing that just kind of like consumed and destroyed without any kind of emotion. So that's like what this book is about. And
Wow.
I'm not trying to get political. The book is political. That is what the book is about. So, more superficially, though, the book touches on the concepts of authenticity and appropriation, that feeling of ownership that white America feels that it has over Black art and Black culture, and other cultures as well, not just Black. But this book focuses specifically on the Delta Blues and the art of Black Americans, and how some folks think they can just weasel their way into acceptance by embodying the culture without it actually being a part of their life or their lived experience. And many people much smarter than me have written a ton about this idea, this concept, and all of this. So I encourage folks to go dig in deeper if this conversation interests you. But I would love to see this made into a mini series. I feel like this is like prime mini series material, and I hope it happens one day. But I would put White Tears, I would put it in a cold fridge. Like, this approaches freezer territory for me sometimes. It's definitely a psychological hell at times. So that is White Tears by Hari Kunzru.
That sounds really good. And it reminded me of um one of the novellas in John Horner Jacobs' A Lush and Seething Hell. Have you read that?
I have it. I have it. I will be reading it.
Yeah, like I think it's the second one. The It's called My Heart Struck Sorrow, and it's about a man who works with like the Library of Congress and the folklore division.
Ooh. Oh man. Ooh, you were saying all the things that like make me tingle. Yes. Well, I'm so glad I already own this title and I can just pull it off my shelf later.
That's not my official pick. My official pick is Sleep Alone by J.A.W. McCarthy. And this is going back to the music as the culture of music coming into play, because this is about Ronnie, who is a merch girl with a band that has been touring for 6 years nonstop.
Oof.
Their life is essentially late nights, dingy hotel rooms, and hoping that nobody notices the wake of bodies that these succubi leave in their wake.
Oh my god. This sounds
So
amazing.
the band and the merch girl are essentially all succubi, and they kind of use the cover of like dark clubs and bars to like perform, feed, and like be off to their next destination.
This is perfect. I love this. I love what you're saying.
So yeah, I love the setup of this, of like, why do we do this? Why is this like the perfect setup and this situation for someone in our, I was gonna say line of work, line of being.
Yeah.
But then at a show, Ronnie meets Helene, who is very sexy, very mysterious. She seems to have secrets of her own. Ronnie convinces the band to let her join them on tour. So she starts like traveling around with them. They start to learn more about each other. And this is a short novella. I don't want to say too much, but at one point they are kind of fighting against the clock as like some of their stuff is getting discovered. And also the band seems to be fighting some illness that eats succubi from the inside out.
Ooh.
So there's a lot. There's like her juggling feelings for this, but also there's a lot of fires to put out right now at the moment.
Yeah.
This had such a rock and roll vibe. Like, it was a great like
Mm.
sapphic story with this like kind of edgy rock atmosphere. I just had a really good time with it.
Oh, it sounds great. It really does sound like a lot of fun.
Yeah, so it's like if Low Shoulder were the succubi instead of
Yes! Ah, yes!
instead of inadvertently creating one.
You're right.
I would put this in the fridge. I really liked that we are reading from the perspective of the monsters. So that is Sleep Alone by J.A.W. McCarthy.
That's going on my TBR immediately. My next pick is Disco Death Trap by Cameron Rubik. I hope I'm saying Cameron's last name correctly.
I think we said Rubik, but I'm not sure if that
Rubik.
was right either. That was
Well,
just
that
what
would
Rachel and I said.
make sense. Yeah, that would make sense. So this book comes with a playlist in the
Okay.
back. Yes,
I love
so
that.
fun. And it's all really great disco and roller rink hits. Lots of 70s, 80s, very energetic, lots of ABBA, that kind of thing. A really good time. So Disco Death Trap is set on New Year's Eve, between it's 1980 into 1981, and a group of high school students are super pumped for their lock-in at the Rollerville Roller Disco, and they're going to be celebrating the new year by boogieing down on the rink to all the hits, the best buds and all their sweethearts, and everyone's going to be together, and it's going to be a party, and they're going to get to show off their sweet moves, and it's just going to be a really great time. But as the clock rings in 1981, the year of blood begins.
Mm.
So, what the kids never really considered was that the roller rink was built on a graveyard. And what they didn't know was that not all the bodies were moved. So, a crazed killer dressed like the Grim Reaper Father Time, like the baby in Father Time that they
Yes.
do. Yeah. So, dressed like the Father Time one,
Okay.
is like slicing and dicing its way through all of these celebrating students. And high schooler Dan and Rollerville employee Denise do everything they can to survive, because it would be a real shame if they got slashed to death before being able to go on their first proper date. But who's the killer? Is it a disgruntled Rollerville employee, an unhinged community member, a fellow student with revenge in their heart, or is it ghosts from the graveyard? We don't know.
Yes, they moved the headstones.
They moved the headstones, but they didn't move the bodies. I love that. It's a classic.
Yeah.
Um, but this is just it's a classic slasher, super fun. The use of music is great. So if this were a movie, it would have excellent needle drops throughout it. And this is an example of music being used to set the scene and kind of create the feeling of the story. Music isn't used as a tool or as a conduit or anything like that. Like White Tears, music is a conduit kind of, and represents a larger context. But in Disco Death Trap, it's just a fun element to the story. And I would say that this is kind of, again, fridge freezer territory. There is a lot of gnarly gore in this one. There are some sick kills, some really nasty descriptions, but it's really fun. So, yes, that is Disco Death Trap by Cameron Rubik.
I love that. I've read part of his like one slasher trilogy, Kill River. I've read the first Kill River. I think I own the second Kill River and have not gotten to it yet, but I've heard good things. And this has been on my
Yeah,
list too.
I've heard really good things about the Kill River series. I want to read those too. His
They're a fun
stuff is
time.
fun.
Yeah, they're a
It's
fun
really
time.
fun.
Okay, my next pick is Wilding Hall by Elizabeth Hand. And this is the same Elizabeth Hand who wrote the new book that's in the Haunting of Hill House universe. The title is, of course, escaping me because all titles escape me as soon as there's a microphone in front of me.
I know.
But this is about an acid folk rock band who, in the 70s, are compelled to record their music. And they decide that when they do this, they want to stay in an old country house, Wilding Hall. They record the album that makes their careers, but their lead singer disappears while they're staying at the house and is never seen again. And what you, as the reader, are reading is the transcript for a documentary that is being done like however many years later about they're interviewing like the band members. There's a psychic and interviewing them about like what they remember about that summer or that time when they were staying there recording the album. They interview the photographer who like shot the like iconic picture that became the album art for that album. I liked getting different perspectives, different people describing the same event and then being like slightly off. Like you could see, like,
Mhm.
I remember it this way, and I
Oh,
remember
yeah.
it happening. I remember it happening this way. And that part as a reader was really fun to like connect the dots and like see like the tricks that memory plays on us.
Oh, yeah.
But this is a perfect read alike. If you liked Daisy Jones and the Six, because it is
Yes.
that same setup, but it's like
Yep.
gothic and
This
spookier.
would be really good if there are librarians listening. If you have patrons who like Daisy Jones and the Six but want to try something spookier, this is a great one to suggest.
I've really liked this one. I will say it's pretty room temperature. I think it's a little more on the like lighter side of things, but I loved the documentary setup and the transcripts and people kind of like reminiscing about how this was like and the role that the success of the music made on their life and also the trauma of, losing someone.
Yeah.
Like it was a lot and I really liked it. So that is Wilding Hall by Elizabeth Hand. Every time I look at this and it says acid folk rock, I keep thinking of like, I don't have to pretend I like acid rock.
Yes. Oh, yes, I love it. What a perfect, and that is a fun genre to have mixed in this because like those people can sorry folks, they can be insufferable. And the music itself lends itself to disorientation and to transcendence, if you will, whatever. So, and also anything that's an element of folk can be tied to old murder ballads or like old traditions, especially in Appalachia and whatnot. So I think it's fun to have that one of the genres featured. So now my picks are going to be getting into the satanic panic territory that we have mentioned
Woo!
multiple times, and it's just such a perfect setup for incorporating music into horror. Um, my next pick is not actually a horror book, but you'll see why I picked it in a minute. It's Hell Patrol by R.D. Tarver, which came out in 2020 from Fourth Mansions Press, which is an independent publisher. And this is more of a sci-fi fantasy adventure, but it does have it has the satanic panic element, and it has some very interesting and graphic scenes of gore. So there are also some spooky parts to it too. So I wouldn't say that it's like that horror is completely off the table with this one. I just wouldn't say that it is the main flavor of this book. If you liked Eddie Munson in Stranger Things, that is this book basically. It's like if we had something devoted to Eddie Munson, it would be Hell Patrol. So Hell Patrol is set in the mid 1990s amidst the late stage satanic panic, and it follows a misfit teen named Jesse. Jesse, along with his mom and his stepdad and his adult brother, all move back to his mom's hometown in Oklahoma, where Jesse quickly makes friends with other misfits, so he kind of creates his crew, which is nice. And the thing that brings them all together is metal music, specifically Judas Priest. So Jesse's older brother Rick, who he uses a chair. He became paralyzed from the waist down after a horrible motorcycle crash. He's a massive Judas Priest fan, and he always makes Jesse tapes of all the new albums that he gets. So when the book opens, Rick has just gotten a hold of Judas Priest's Painkiller, which is an incredible album. If people haven't heard Painkiller, if you like metal or if you're interested in listening to some metal, Painkiller is like, I love it so much. It is such a good album. I feel like it might be Judas Priest's best album. And it also, I think, is like implicated in some true crime stuff. That's what it's there. That
Yeah,
was like mentioned in.
that is my understanding of Judas
Mm-hmm.
Priest is from, or that is my cultural reference
Yeah.
point for Judas Priest is true crime.
Yeah. So there's like murders that
Yeah.
happened and it was like blamed on this
Hmm.
album
Yeah.
or an album before. I don't know. But Judas Priest was definitely uh invoked
I
for
thought you were going to
killing.
say it was in the Tipper Gore.
Well, that too. I
Yeah, for
mean,
sure.
yes. Yeah, that was part of it too. This was all during the time when Tipper Gore was on her crusade to get like that parental advisory sticker put on albums. And that is an interesting piece of music history. If you're interested in that, listeners, like there's a bunch of great podcast episodes about that. I think like
You're wrong about.
yes, You're Wrong About does a really good one on that. Um So Jesse bonds with his new friends over Painkiller and soon learns that they have a band. And oh, lucky him, they need a bass player, and Jesse plays bass. So he joins their band. And that is a huge honor in high school. If you get asked to join a band, it is just the greatest thing in the world. So they decide to name their band Hell Patrol after the second track on Painkiller as an homage to how they all became friends. And so Jesse and his friends soon get busy becoming legitimately good at playing metal music and playing gigs around town and doing silly teen shit like playing in abandoned mines and then weird things start to happen around town, and Jesse and his friends are kind of distracted until it starts to affect them. Kids start to go missing in school. Jesse and his friends have creepy experiences with dog like creatures, and then like rumblings start to kick up about the influence of Satan and metal music on the teens around town. And some very influential voices in the church start to blame metal music on all of the tragedies that are happening in their town. And classic satanic panic textbook stuff. Kids have to like burn their albums. They're all like grounded and on lockdown, and they can't dress the way they want to dress, and they can't express themselves the way they want to express themselves. But unknown to Jesse and almost everyone else in town, hell is a real place, and hell's minions are getting a bit feisty. So soon, Jesse and Hell Patrol find themselves in a situation where they have to harness the pure awesomeness of metal music to defeat dark powers, both in the human dimension and beyond. So,
I
this
love
book,
this.
yeah, it's extremely fun. It's absolutely a romp. Like when I was like writing a little review of it and reading other people's reviews, the word romp was mentioned in like every review. People have a blast reading this book. Um, the characters are charming and delightful, and the world is really imaginative. And it does a good job of showing what it was like for some kids during the Satanic Panic, basically being persecuted for just enjoying a certain kind of music or dressing a certain way, or just not belonging in a conventional society. So it's a really great coming of age story. And I really want R.D. Tarver to write more books. Like he's a musician in Oklahoma. I think he's a metal musician in Oklahoma, and he wrote this book and it like popped up on my Instagram, and I was like, well, looks like a thing I need to have. So I bought
Yeah.
it, and I just really need him, please, to write more. This was so good. It was some of the most fun I've ever had reading a book, honestly. This is room temperature. This book is not terribly scary, although I will say there are definitely some brutal images in terms of like gore. So maybe it's not quite room temperature. Perhaps it is a bit fridge worthy. And there are a couple jump scares. There's a couple scenes, especially when they go into the mines, that get a little spooky. But overall, it's the same level as Stranger Things. I know Stranger Things gets used a lot as a comparison, but it's very comparable in terms of like scare factor
Yeah.
and tone. So that is Hell Patrol by R.D. Tarver.
Ooh. I know you've been talking about this like since you read it. I know you had a
Yeah.
really good time with it.
Yeah.
My last pick is Schrader's Chord by Scott Leeds. This came out this year, and I was so excited about reading this, but also that all of the promo for this book, like the visual like
Yes.
promos were so awesome. Art
Yeah.
like the art style.
They were amazing. Props to that team who did that.
They had this like vintage ad feel to them. This is about Charlie Remick, who is a musician, and he is going home for his estranged father's funeral after his mysterious death. There, he learns that his father left him the keys to his record shop and 4 mysterious records that could open a gate to the land of the dead.
Oh, man. Wow. Thanks.
Thanks, Dad.
Just what I wanted.
So the thing with these records is, and I thought this was really cool, like a really cool part, they all have to be like put down and like played at the exact same time. So there's like a scene where they're like all at the
Oh.
record store, and it's
Oh.
he, his sister, and like 2 record store employees, and
Oh
they're
my
like,
god, why would they
"Hey."
do this? Stop, guys, don't.
Yeah, so they play them, and basically immediately they can all see dead people,
Oh.
and they know that they are all marked for death.
Oh my god.
And so now, like, the only person that can save them is the ghost of Charlie's dad. He's trying to,
Well, he
like,
started
walk
it,
walk them
so
through how to fix
yeah.
this.
It's on him.
But it was a lot of, like, "You did what?"
Yeah, right, exactly. "No, no, no!"
I had a really good time with this. I thought the character work in this was really good. I felt like the relationships, the setting, everything felt really lived in. Like, I felt like
Mm,
these were real characters. Like, I found myself, like, genuinely, like, rooting for people. And I also feel like 2023 has been the year for, like, I feel like a lot of things, cursed objects, vampires, but it's
yes.
also been the year for, like, books about weird relationships with your parents.
Ooh, definitely.
Like
Yes.
daddy issues lit.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I did enjoy that part of it as well, like coming to terms with grief, and I mean, like, coming to terms with grief when you can actually talk to your, like, deceased
Mm.
father,
Ooh.
um, and talk about things and kind of, like, hash things out. I had a really good time with this. I loved the atmosphere. I There was some genuinely, like, really creepy moments and imagery. I love a cursed record.
Yes.
And I know I mentioned I mentioned in, like, the new releases episode when I talked about it, I'm like, "Why is it always a record, though? Why is it never, like, a cursed hit clip?" Like, can you imagine if it was, like, when
The
something bad
same
was
30 seconds of Britney Spears over and over again. It would definitely make it a little more palatable. I'd be like, "Okay, I can handle it." Oh, I would love to see that.
I would too. Someone needs to make this happen, please. Like, a haunted, like, NSYNC bit or something.
Yes, yes. Oh, beautiful.
Rating-wise, I would say this is fridge. This had a lot of terrifying imagery. I think the concept of, like, a cursed vinyl records that can open up, like, a portal to
Mhm.
open up a portal, not necessarily hell, but, like, can open up the, like, gate between the living and the dead, and people just trying to get through their normal day and seeing, like, dead people
Ugh.
is a lot to deal with, but it was also very heartfelt,
Mhm.
and I felt like that was a good balance for it. I had a really good time with this. So that is Schrader's Chord by Scott Leeds.
I am so excited to read that book. I pre-ordered it. I have it. It's in my bedroom, like in the little stack of books right next to my bed, my immediate TBR. I did not pick it up because I knew you were going to read it for this episode and I prioritized other books so that I could have my books to talk about. But it is like next up. I am so pumped. I When I heard about this book coming out, I like freaked out and I haven't hit the pre-order button faster in my life, I don't think. So I really am going to relish my experience reading Schroeder's Court, I think.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear what you think.
Yeah. Okay, so I cheated. I have 4 books, so I have one more book. And my last pick is Hell's Bells by Lisa Quigley, and this is part of the Rewind or Die series. And this came out in 2020 from Unnerving, and this is an indie published novella. It's a coming of age story. It's a lot about female friendships. And again, this is one that's also satanic panic related. So, Hell's Bells follows a group of 4 girlfriends in high school during the Satanic Panic, more in the 80s than the 90s. And it follows them as they work through all of the trials and tribulations of life and interpreting their beliefs and how that affects their friendships with one another during this crucial time. You know, teenagers, your lives are changing a lot. So, your friendships change pretty quickly in high school. And that can be hard. That can be very heartbreaking, challenging, emotionally draining. And that is a lot of what this book is about. So Sasha, Haley, Jessica, and Tiffany are not conventional teen girls. They love music. They dress in different alternative styles. They aren't concerned with the expectations of adults around them until Haley starts to change. She starts dressing like she's on the honor roll and spouting holier than thou nonsense from a church she's been attending, and this really messes with the dynamic of the group. Sasha feels like she's losing her friend and that and with her friend, she's losing her only faith, which is Queen and Freddie Mercury specifically. Haley is directly challenging all of their loves of music and their alternative style and the things that they have held so close, and it's kind of just like causing chaos in the group. But one day, shit really hits the fan, and Haley goes too far in her proselytizing, and much of that focuses on rock music that they all love. And it really gets out of hand, like real bad. Like things go very, very wrong pretty quickly. And Sasha decides that they need to prove to Haley once and for all that God does not exist, and the way they're going to prove that is by trying to summon the devil. Because
Oh,
if they can summon the devil, then I guess God does exist. Because if the devil exists, then God must exist, right? But if they try to summon the devil and the devil doesn't show up, then that must mean that God doesn't exist either. Because in Haley's faith, you need to have both.
that's like Plan Z. Like, how do you there?
I know, she jumped right in. She's right into the deep end. So with this like airtight plan,
Yeah.
um they try to engage in a satanic summoning ritual, something that one of the girls has found in like her abuela's book of sorts that she has. She's like, I think my grandma's done something like this. Let's try it. So they do abuela's summoning ritual, and something happens. But is it Satan that the girls really need to be worried about? Or is it somebody else that the girls really need to be worried about?
Oh.
And I don't want to spoil any more because that's really the heart and guts of the book. But through this very traumatic experience that is very intense in the book, the thing that gives Sasha strength is her love of Queen and her love of Freddie Mercury. And she feels Freddie Mercury, who had recently passed away in this timeline of the book, she feels him there with her, helping to support her. And she relies on the music of Queen to give her strength to heal her friendships basically with the other girls, and to kind of fight through their differences and decide like how they're going to move forward. There is so much like intense gross stuff that happens in a very short period of time in this book, like a very small amount of pages, and that it's great. I mean, you're just going to like blast through this because it's a novella, it's already short, but once it picks up, it like goes, it really gets going. um, and as I mentioned, like in Hell Patrol, this has a lot of similarities to Hell Patrol, but I really liked that this was a tight knit group of girls, of young women. But
Oh.
music is used as a powerful tool against evil. It's used as kind of a self empowering thing where you identify who you are as a person through your music, and you use the music to draw power from in you to stand up for your values. And I think a lot of us have that experience. I think a lot of us feel that music gives that to us, and it is a wonderful thing that we can access through music. So I think that Hell's Bells would probably fall into Fridge because of the gore in that short period of time. Most of it's not gory or scary or anything, but like I said, that like short chunk of like extremely intense stuff is pretty intense. So I would put it in the Fridge. There is a scene in particular with leeches that really got to me. So if, heads up for that. But that is Hell's Bells by Lisa Quigley.
I love that. I've had this actually on my Kindle for a few years now.
Yeah, you
So
should.
I
It's a great afternoon read.
I need to get to it. I just can't get over it. This is their first plan?
I
This is
know.
the first plan they come up with?
Things go awry very fast. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. There were so many books that
Yes.
we didn't mention or that we
Hmm.
didn't get around to. Like, I don't think either of us read Heart-Shaped Box by Joe Hill because I know that's
No.
one that's mentioned everywhere too.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I figured it's been out for a while.
Yeah.
People
No,
probably know about it.
I feel like We Sold Our Souls has gotten a few
Hmm.
mentions this year, but of
Yes.
course, had
I
to give it a shout
loved
out here.
Yeah, I loved We Sold Our Souls. I know it's kind of a hit or miss one for people in Grady Hendrix' lineup, but it is very strong for me in his books. It's like probably my favorite one.
I need to reread it,
Well, as
though.
someone who, like, as I was reading it, I was like, Grady Hendrix really knows what he's talking about when he's talking about like metal bands and the metal scene, and that was really fun.
Yeah, I did not listen to a ton of metal when I read it, so I feel like I need to read it with, like,
Yeah.
the context I have now to
Yeah,
enjoy it
you
more.
you have a different
I enjoyed it
perspective.
the first time, like, I was
Mhm.
definitely like, I it's a Grady Hendrix book, like, I had a great time, but I'll have
Yeah.
different context now.
Mhm.
Um, I was gonna mention Your Favorite Band Cannot Save You. I read it so long ago, though, but that is about a music blogger who, finds out about this band, and he kind of starts, like, following them around, writing stuff up on them, and there's just, like, something weird about them, and, like, everyone who listens to them becomes, like, addicted to their music,
Ooh.
and there's other stuff going on. It's a very tiny book, so I don't wanna get into it too much. Also, it was a very long time ago, and I don't think I can remember what the stuff
Mhm.
was that was going on, to be honest.
We read so many books in a year, it's hard
I
to
know.
keep track of everything.
I was looking at it and I'm like, "I remember stuff happened in this, but I don't
Yeah,
remember what those things."
something happened. The book had a plot.
It
I
did.
do know that.
I remember enjoying it.
Yes. Yeah. So I also had so many books that popped into my head for this. Um, should I get into my list?
Yeah. Or
Okay. So I also read A Song for Quiet by Cassandra Caw, which is a very short novella. Maybe it's even like shorter than a novella. It's not long at all. And this is a cosmic horror about another blues musician where music is being used to basically like open the portal for old gods to come in. At least that's what I was picking up on. It's a very short read, so things are sparse, but it was really interesting. It really played on that kind of connection, the blues connection with cosmic horror. I feel like that's when I see blues pop up a lot, is like in context of cosmic horror. I find that so interesting because the other one I was going to mention like this is The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor Laval, which he's a musician. So like again, cosmic horror
yeah.
nod, all of that. So that's really interesting to me that these two things like seem to be connected again and again. I mentioned this earlier in the episode that I read Festival by Christopher Golden and Tom Levin, which this is the one where folks go to a music festival
Yeah.
and then shit hits the fan at the music festival. But what's happening is it's the site of an old Viking massacre where like the Vikings were massacred. It's in England and the Vikings were massacred. And so now their spirits are rising back up to take vengeance. And it's just like a bloodbath of like Viking ghosts just killing everyone at this music festival. And this is like a music festival with a bunch of different kinds of music. Like they mentioned Billie Eilish is playing.
Nice.
And there's like all different kinds of stuff happening at this music festival, and you follow a couple characters, and this again is a very short read. It also has really cool illustrations in it, so it was a really enjoyable read and really fun and an interesting take. And the music is used as a weapon in this one, and it kind of like bewitches people and it causes harm to bodies and things like that. It's really gnarly scenes. I've been saying gnarly a lot this episode, but I really don't know how else. It's like
It's
gross.
thematic.
It's yeah, right? Yeah, gnarly. Um, and then I have a couple other ones to mention here. So this is a unique one, I think. But Violet by Scott Thomas uses music wonderfully as a horror element. Music is used in Violet to invoke horror. It becomes like a trigger for the horror when you start to hear the music. Music is used as a trigger in Violet. So, like, when you start to hear the music, that means the horror is happening. It's being used by the agent of horror to instill fear. And this one actually is a mixtape. So it's the mixtape isn't necessarily cursed, but the mixtape is being used in a way that is absolutely horrific and terrifying. I loved Violet so much, and the musical choices are excellent. It will make you be terrified of Blackbird by the Beatles.
Mm.
So, Violet is a wonderful one to pick up if you want to see music being used very creatively for creating an element of dread and terror. um, so I really like Violet by Scott Thomas. And then I have a couple more. So I know Fever House by Keith Rawson came out recently, and that follows musicians.
Hmm.
I don't know, I haven't read it, but it looks really
It
fun. I
does look
definitely
fun.
want to. Yeah. And then I've got two that aren't actually really horror, but I think listeners will be interested. So, Sylvia Moreno Garcia has a book called Signal to Noise, which
Yeah.
seems more science fiction fantasy.
Yeah.
And this is like, again, this one was compared to Stranger Things, but it's about teens who use music to harness magic.
Hmm.
And then they have to go, go on a mission or
Yeah.
something like that. And yeah, so that one's more like science fiction fantasy adventure. And then a recent release from this past year is Gone to the Wolves by John Ray, and this seems more like a thriller. I don't think that it's really horror, and it seems more in the thriller camp or literary camp. But this follows a group of friends who are metal fans, and they kind of drift apart as life, will do to close knit friend groups. And then one of the friends goes missing under very mysterious circumstances, and the rest of the friends have to gather, assemble the crew and figure out what the hell happened to her. And music seems to be a very important part of this book. The cover is incredible. It has the hairy font that it uses, like that
Yeah.
metal hairy font for the font of the title of the book. And it's like a really beautiful cover, in my opinion. So those, and there are so many more out there, I'm sure. And if anybody has really fun, like music horror recommendations, like I absolutely want them. Please send them my way. I will read all of them.
Yeah. It was a fun subgenre to dive into.
Yeah.
All right. Well, should we talk chilling obsessions?
Yes. Yes, we should.
I know you want to talk about yours.
Yes. So I'm sure I'm not the only person who knows about this, but I am in love with the new Goosebumps show that is both on Disney Plus and Hulu. It's updated weekly on Disney Plus, and I'm not sure when this episode is going to come out, so maybe it's all out, like maybe the whole first season is out already, but I right now it's updated every Friday. And on Disney or on Hulu they did the first 5 episodes, and then they'll probably put the last 5 episodes up when it's finished. So if you have either Hulu or Disney Plus, you can watch this. And it's just, I thought it was going to be stupid. I thought it was going to be like, I don't know, a little too silly, but it's not. It's like if you enjoy teen dramas, let's say you're a fan of The Vampire Diaries or something like that, it is kind of like that, but like less dramatic. And it uses all of these really fun elements from the Goosebumps books that we all love and have a fondness for, like a soft spot for. It ties a lot of those plots from those books together in one cohesive story in a really, really impressive way. And Justin Long is in it, and he's kind of like emerged as a new scream queen for this era, and he's excellent in it. He's super fun. He does some great body work. He's doing a lot of body acting. And it's just really fun. It's really, really fun. It's like the highlight of my week when Friday hits and I'm done with work and I can get my ice cream and watch my Goosebumps. And that might sound really sad, but you know what? It's giving me life. It's keeping me alive.
Yeah.
So I love the new Goosebumps show. I hope other people are enjoying it too.
I did watch the first episode of it, and I agree. It has like a darker vibe than
Yes.
what I was expecting. And I think my
Mm-hmm.
expectations were not super high because I did not like the design for the new Slappy. And I was kind of like,
Mm-hmm.
"Mm." But
Mm-hmm.
even my grumpy self was like, okay, this is pretty good. It's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. It gets pretty dark.
Yeah. My chilling obsession is Totally Killer, the slasher on Amazon Prime with Kiernan Shipka and Julie Bowen. Actually, Julie Bowen's not in it for long because she's the mom in the adult timeline.
But she
But
has such a good role, though. Oh my
yeah,
god.
Claire from Modern Family. Um, you're following like I was gonna say Claire from Modern Family, and Kiernan Shipka is her daughter, and she essentially was like the only survivor of a slew of murders, like, that happened when she was in high school. And so that happened on like around Halloween. So she does not want to let her daughter go out on Halloween. The daughter like convinces her that it's fine. And then for reasons I don't want to like give too much away, Kiernan Shipka does end up time traveling back to
Yes.
the 80s and sees her mom in high school and has to like prevent the murders and try to like save her and her friends. And it's just so funny because her mom is so
She's
mean.
so mean.
She's like
Oh my
the
god.
biggest bully. And she obviously cannot tell her that she is her daughter from the future. So it adds a lot of shenanigans. But I want to pair with that another obsession I have had, which was this book I got. It's a Quirk Books book. It's called Paperback Crush: The Totally Radical History of 80s and 90s Teen Fiction.
Ooh.
And it is like paperbacks from hell, that it's kind of like the big kind of guidebook, glossy pages, and it's all the like vintage paperback covers and kind of like
Oh,
the history. And I'm only in the first chapter because I have truly been taking my time with this. In the first chapter is all like romance and like the different like romance books and like romance series and surprising diversity. Like I did not know that there were sapphic teen
wow.
romances in the 80s. And
No.
granted, they were not a lot. They were not
Yeah.
as accessible and
Right.
diverse as we have today, but like
They were
they did
present.
they existed. So it's been really interesting. And she does have like interviews with authors. Like R.L. Stein wrote some teen romances
Ooh,
for
yeah.
like series.
Mhm.
I didn't know that.
Mhm.
And there is like I am of course excited to get to like the horror chapter with like Christopher Pike. So
Yes.
keep hitting the mic
Yes.
with like Christopher Pike and R.L. Stein. So I'm really excited about that. Like I said, I just finished the romance one, so it was a lot of like Judy Blume, like
Mm.
Forever,
Yeah. Mhm.
type stuff, and a lot of stuff I had never heard of.
Oh yeah, there's just like so much there was so much published back then.
Yeah.
And it was like, those were things that I would stumble upon in my school library and also in my mom's library when I was a kid. She was working at the public library and I would just like stumble on those. So I definitely need to get my hands on this book because I think just flipping through it is going to be just a straight shot of
Yeah.
nostalgia to my
Oh my
veins.
gosh, if you ever wanna borrow it, let me know.
Oh
But yeah,
yeah,
it is
definitely.
so fun to flip through. So yeah, I would pair those 2 together, like
Mhm.
Totally Killer and Paperback Crush.
Yeah. Totally.
Totally radical history of 80s and 90s teen fiction.
Totally Killer is was really fun. I watched that too. It's just like so cute and sweet and a funny thing I thought about the movie that happens a couple times when she goes back to the 80s and there are all of these like super offensive things
Yes!
that
She's like,
happen that
"Whoa,
were like
whoa, whoa!"
unwanted touch like all of this stuff that was so normal in the 80s, and the 80s was like a brutal time for teenagers, and she cannot like stand on her 2 feet in the 80s. She's getting chewed up and spit out and
The
everyone is
gym
so
class?
nasty. Oh my
They're
god, there's
like,
just blood pouring out of
they're
everyone's faces.
pelting her with dodgeballs, and she's like,
Yeah.
this is just allowed," and I'm like, "I guess that's just the '80s." The '80s were
Yeah.
just like that. It was like
They're
a
so
free-for-all. There
brutal.
was no adults. There was no
Mm-mm.
rules, apparently.
Yeah, and it's so funny like having this teen from who was basically raised in the 20 teens
Yeah.
going back to the 80s and like the differences between the kids. It was very cute and funny.
Very, like, Final Girls-esque. It's different,
Yeah.
but I can definitely see the Final Girls comparison. You know what? Love
Yeah.
them both. Both made
Yeah,
me
absolutely.
tear up.
Yeah. Yeah, they're sweet and they're fun.
Mhm. It is time for our second tradition, which is, of course, really appropriate for this theme.
Yes.
So what is your Final Girl song?
So I feel like I'm going to disappoint this time. I have been on the show several times. I have offered multiple stylings of Final Girl songs, and they're all added on the playlist. So I thought I would just call out two songs that were mentioned in the books that I read. that serve as final girl songs for the characters.
Oh,
So the first one is Hell Patrol by Judas Priest. And it is a great final girl song. It really is like pulling up the power from within, like right when you think you're about to collapse and die, like, no, we're the Hell Patrol. We're going to ride into the night kind of thing. And then Seven Seas of Rye by Queen is Sasha's um, final girl song, basically. That is the song that brings her power in Hell's Bells. Um, so I wanted to call both of those out and add those to the playlist if they're not there already. And I'll do a better job of preparing a different final girl song for my next guest appearance on Books
I
in the Freezer.
love that. I wanted to add one this time. I was going back and
Yay.
forth on like a lot of stuff, and I'm like, should I do like a rock one? But I won't.
Mm-hmm.
I've been listening to a lot of Bad Omens lately, but it just like
Oh,
wasn't the
yeah.
vibe that I was
Yeah.
looking for right now. So
Mm-hmm.
I am instead going to go the girly pop indie route and go with My Kink is Karma
Yes! Oh my god. I'm so
by
happy you're picking this song.
by Chapel Roan because I feel like it has like my boyfriend was the killer, I killed him, and now I will do my happy dance
Oh,
over your dead body.
yes. Oh my god. I did briefly consider no shit, I briefly considered this song,
Are
bringing
you
up the song.
serious?
Yes, I love that song so much. I'm so excited to go see her live.
Yay!
And
Which is another
and
live show we will go to together.
yes, yes, and we will be very excited when she plays this song. This
Yes.
song is such energy. It's such just like fuck you energy. It's
Mhm.
amazing.
It's like, I am smiling while you are ruining your life, and it is
Yes,
making me so happy.
yes. I am getting power from you destroying yourself.
I feel like it really works. So
It does.
hopefully someone will add a little sprinkle of Chapel Roan on a horror soundtrack sometime.
Ooh. Yes, yes. We can only hope.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming on. Well, there was something you wanted to mention.
Yes. Oh, yes. Thank you for reminding me. So, this is more specifically for librarians listening, but I am a librarian and I am a member of the Horror Writers Association. Librarians can be members of the Horror Writers Association. There are different tiers that you can join at. That designate your level of participation in the group, and librarians are very welcome. There are a lot of us who are members, and it's a lovely community to be a part of if you enjoy horror fiction and you want to talk more to authors about their work and collaborate with them directly on things like programming for your library or readers advisory and things like that. So I am also in the Horror Writers Association part of the Library Advisory Council. So if there are any librarians or authors out there who are interested in how they can connect with each other more efficiently, librarians, if you're interested in how to host horror themed programming in your library or bring authors to visit and do readings or give talks, or just if you're just interested in how to support horror in your library and gauge interest for the genre, please reach out to me, or you can reach out to other members of the Library Advisory Council. I am on Instagram at Forgotten Corners. I am still kind of on X, but like not really.
I'm like fully out
I'm
of there.
yeah.
I fully transitioned to threads.
Yeah, I'm on yeah, I'm definitely on Threads, on again Forgotten Corners. I'm on Blue Sky, Forgotten Corners. I'm on Substack,
Okay.
Forgotten
Okay.
Corners. And my X is Forgotten Corners without any vowels because my name was going to be too long for Twitter with the vowels. So if you just write Forgotten Corners and then delete all of the vowels, that's my that's my handle on X. But again, I'm not really there anymore. But you can DM me or message me, however, and ask for more information about any of that. The other librarians on the advisory council are like super cool people, and we love sharing our ideas and things that we've tried and anything we can do to help you in your journey in incorporating more horror programming into your library.
Yeah, so I will have to add those links to the show notes to add as resources for any librarians listening looking to add more horror.
Excellent. Yes.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking to me about music horror.
Yes, thank you so much for being game for this episode. This was super fun. We got to read some really cool books and
Yeah.
watch some cool movies, and
Yeah.
our lists have just grown.
Hmm.
So we'll have plenty to enjoy in the future as well.
For sure. Books in the Freezer is a bi-weekly podcast. We post episodes every other Tuesday. You can find us on Threads, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Books in the Freezer. Or you can send us an email at booksinthefreezer@gmail.com. Show notes for this episode and all previous episodes are at booksinthefreezer.com, where you will find a list of all the books mentioned in this episode. If you would like to support the podcast, there are a few ways to do that, and some of them can be found on the show notes at booksinthefreezer.com. There are links to the Books in the Freezer Patreon, as well as some affiliate links. There are ways to support the podcast without spending any money, like sharing about the show on social media or leaving a review on a site like Apple Podcasts. I am Stephanie. Thank you for listening, and see you next time on Books in the Freezer.